welcome to the show. You know, they always say the devil's in the details, but that's a big one. I'm not sure if it was a slip of the tongue, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts start back with where we had the economy before the pandemic, the best economy in 50 years, going back to 1969, and the biggest decrease in inequality between minorities and other people, and also just within our economy. And also, just think how great the economy was. The highest, lowest unemployment, highest employment in 50 years, and wages of lower income people going up a lot faster than wages of high income people. So we had a good economy. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my answer to your question.
All right, but even more specifically then, the reason it wasn't broke is you can trace it back to the implementation of tax cuts that went into place. As soon as they went into place, automatically blue-collar wages exploded more than 3% every single month year over year. The gap between black and white unemployment, the narrowest it ever was. Poverty rates for blacks and Hispanics at an all-time record low. All of that's to your point. So then what if we go the exact opposite way? We know taxes were promised and elections have consequences, but I don't think anyone thought that the President Biden was talking about a household making $400,000. I always tell people, Senator, be careful when you pick up your torch and your pitchforks. Sooner or later, you might end up in front of your own house.
The middle-income people of this country are smart enough to know that when they hear a politician or even the President of the United States say that only high-income people, the very wealthiest, are going to pay the tax, they know better. If you go there, you're going to eventually end up paying taxing middle-income people because, first of all, you aren't going to get all you want from the very wealthiest people in this country because they're smart enough to hire the best lawyers, they're smart enough to find the tax shelters and all that stuff, and they're smart enough to know that I'm not going to work full-time if I'm only going to be able to keep about a third of my income.
Right. I mean, and to your point, even at $400,000, if it was an individuals, so many small businesses will get swept up into that. I want to just get your thoughts quickly on where this the whole fight for the filibuster is going. And maybe Senator Manchin put a cap on it today with his comments, but it really is interesting how many folks down there that thought the filibuster was a great idea now even think it's a threat to democracy.
Well, you just pointed out the key point here, how inconsistent and intellectually dishonest the Democrats who are talking about doing that are, because they defended the 60-vote rule in the United States Senate well, throughout history, as far as I know, and now all of a sudden they want to change it. And what we want to remind them of is they're not always going to be in the majority, and they ought to respect what James Madison said in the Federalist Papers about the purpose of the United States Senate. It was to bring certainty and consistency to public policy, because if you have run the Senate like you run the House of Representatives every 2 years, you're going to be changing things, and they're going to be changing constantly. And the United States Senate was supposed to bring constancy to public policy, predictability to public policy.
Senator, the DNC recently unveiled a billboard ad targeting you and Senator Joni Ernst, your opposition to that $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. Of course, those $1,400 checks. There's some local polls showing that you might be in trouble. What's your response to that? Because people do like free money. How do you push back against that?
Well, isn't it a perfect example of how political this whole operation was with the $1 9/10 trillion, particularly when we did 5 bills the year before that were very bipartisan and passed with 90 votes in the United States Senate, and they didn't want to do it because with Republicans just wanting to do things connected with the pandemic, about $600 billion, then the wish lists that the Democrats wanted and got wouldn't have been accomplished. So it really is a Democratic agenda with the cover of helping people hurt by the pandemic, and so it's you got to see it as purely a political move. And look who paid for the billboard: the Democrat National Committee.
Yeah. Senator, I know you've also been calling for the Justice Department to review how states have handled this nursing home crisis during the pandemic, and if rules have been violated. Where does that stand right now?
Well, I discussed this morning with some of the witnesses before the Finance Committee on the whole nursing home issue that was the subject of that hearing. And we have, I think, 4 or 5 states where the Attorney General's already investigating it, and several of us senators sent letters to the Justice Department that they should not change the agenda, they should keep their investigation going. But we raised the issue because when you get a new administration like we do now, they might change some investigation, but they ought to proceed. So I don't have an update other than everybody at the hearing that I questioned thought the investigations by DOJ ought to continue. And I think they should,
Senator,
too.
Absolutely. I've got one more thing I'd like to ask about another issue affecting your state. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi recently weighed in on the election in Iowa. The Congresswoman Miller Meeks, who was certified the winner by just 6 votes. Now the Speaker is suggesting that somehow that race might be overturned. Let's take a listen to her.
Okay.
And our candidate, Rita Hart, the Democratic candidate, asked for this process to begin. Even Justice Scalia agreed that the House has the authority to seat members, and therefore we can count the votes. 6 votes out of 400,000 cast.
What's going on here?
It ought to take a lot of guts with the thought that 221 Democrats voting as a unit could throw a Republican member out of the House of Representatives that won the election even after 2 vote recounts, and the Democratic candidate had an opportunity to go to the Supreme Court of Iowa, come immediately to the House of Representatives, that they could throw that vote out and overturn the vote of 400,000 Iowans. Now that takes a lot of guts. At the same time, those same Democrats were convicting Republicans of the fact that we weren't naming Joe Biden the winner on November the 4th.
Yeah, certainly smacks of hypocrisy. Senator, thank you for your time. We covered a lot of ground. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would glad to be with you anytime.